Okay, here's a quick introduction to the B21 Nav panel that's in the Modolo plus B21 AS33 for Microsoft Flight Simulator. It's just going to be a quick tour of this gauge. Okay, the gauge is primarily a map gauge, but it also gives this nav information that's described here. I'm going to take you through each of the knobs. Top left knob, easy, doesn't do anything. I haven't implemented it yet. The idea is it's a placeholder for something where it says north up. I'll be able to provide other options there, but I haven't done that yet. The horizon button displays an artificial horizon or not. This is for beta 0.90. There is another video, by the way, of a flight, a demonstration flight using this instrument, particularly looking at this information on the nav panel. These 4 buttons on each corner with arrows simply pan the map. So if you want to move pan up in the map, you go up. If you want to pan down in the map, you go down. Kind of pretty obvious. You can leave the map like that, but if you hit the next button along center, it will recenter the plane in the map. The zoom button does what it says on the tin. You can zoom in, zoom out. And by the way, this has a Microsoft flight plan loaded. I did it before we kind of started. It's what you do when you go in. You create your flight, you click the load button, either you choose your airport or you choose your plane, whatever. There's a load/save button on the bottom of that screen. You click load and you can load a .pln file, which is a flight plan. And this instrument will load that flight plan, which is basically a series of waypoints, typically including the start and finish airport as well. It's worth customizing those flight plans. You can use little nav map, for example, to create it. It is worth customizing those using user waypoints to make it particularly suited for gliding use, which is not really part of the topic of this talk. Okay, and then most of the time I'll talk about these buttons down the bottom. Okay, so when you have got a flight plan loaded, this task is now live. You'll see in a moment that there's multiple waypoints in this task. Our current waypoint is TP1. It's just the name that was contained in the flight plan for turn point 1. This arrow indicator is telling us whether we're pointing towards it or not. And you can see we roughly are, so it's actually centered at the moment. How far is it? What true bearing is that waypoint on? 219. You can see we're pointing 227. That's the bearing to it. Typically it's just easier to look at the map. You can tell how you're doing. This wind is the effective wind between you and that waypoint. So it's kind of 0, because if you look at it, you can see the wind in this example is pretty much coming from our starboard side, i.e. it's blowing at the plane this way. So it's pretty much perpendicular to the track, and that's an effective wind overall of 0 knots getting from here to here. There's no headwind, there's no tailwind particularly. It's pretty much just straightforward crosswind. This is using this 6-knot wind from 310 or whatever it is. That's the wind figure it's using. When we take off, that wind will be higher. It's lower on the ground. After you've gone up a couple of hundred feet, you'll actually find the real wind. And then, most importantly, this last number here is saying if you are currently at 812 feet, I'll do this in feet for now. If you're 812 feet, you toggle these things typically, which is whatever that is, 250 meters. So if you're 812 feet and you are going to a turn point, which itself is at 2,360 feet, for what that's worth, is saying your arrival height, MSL, is minus 1,350 feet. So it's going to cost you, if we're at 812 feet now, it's going to cost you about 2,100 feet. With this crosswind, pretty much a 0 net wind, it's going to cost you about 2,100 feet in a straight glide to get there. In the demo flight with this nav panel, you'll see me working this knob here. It's called the McCready knob, and you're adjusting indirectly, it's much better explained in the other video, what speed are you going to be flying at? You're actually telling the computer instrument what speed are you basically intended to fly at, because obviously that is going to affect your arrival height. If I turn this up, you see it says I'm going to fly at 79 knots, turn up again, it says I'm going to fly at 90 knots. You'll see as I'm saying I'm going to fly faster, you'll see my arrival height is going down. Okay, because I'm coming down faster, so it's going to take me more height to get there. Okay, so this here is the predicted arrival height at the next waypoint, this is just one waypoint of the task. Let's do this right-hand button here first. Okay, you can change to the next waypoint simply by clicking this button. Okay, that's taken us to TP2, and now it is giving us the same information. If I scroll the map here, there's the leg for TP2. Center again. It's saying, but if we were to fly directly to TP2 now, we would get there at minus 1,000 feet at TP2. If I pick the next waypoint, sorry, TP1, TP2, TP3, which is a waypoint off to the right here, we'd get there at minus 2,640 feet. Obviously, what it means is, if we were flying at say 3,000 feet, it'd be telling us we'll get there at about 370 feet above sea level. Okay, so this waypoint button and knob is kind of pretty crucial. If you click it, it changes you to the next waypoint. If you rotate it, you can either go backwards or forwards through the task. Okay. It is a consideration whether I will add automatic clicking on to the next waypoint. I might add that when you get within 500 meters of the waypoint, it will automatically click onto the next. That wouldn't be a difficult thing to add. To make it clear that you still want manual control, otherwise that automatic changing sometimes can be a pain in the arse because the computer thinks it knows better than you do. Okay, so the hold up, the task button, so we've done that button down there, the task button shows this information, but shows it for the whole task, but it's still highlighting your current waypoint. And the difference between your current waypoint and the rest of them is that for your current waypoint, you are going to go directly there. That's the whole point. After you've gone to that waypoint, from wherever you are, you're going to go directly to that waypoint. You're going to get there at minus 2,640 feet. We're on the ground at the moment. That's not a surprise. Then the next waypoint you will go to after that waypoint. You'd have gone past that waypoint first, and then you go to the next one. And the same is true of the next one. So these distances are cumulative because there's an assumption you are actually going around the task. It's not giving you the direct to distance and direction for each of these. It is for the first one. It's saying it's 45 kilometers away, it's on a bearing of 65 degrees, and there's a tailwind. Plus is a tailwind. Plus is a happy sign. That's saying there's a positive contribution to your flight. You're going to get 3 knots pushing you towards the waypoint. A minus is bad news. That's how much headwind you've got. You've got 3 knot headwind. Okay, you can still change your current waypoint, either up or down. You can see it changing here. TP1. Let's say start. Let's say we haven't started yet. Okay. So here is setting the start point as my current waypoint, and it's saying it's 0.6 kilometers again. I just want to make it clear we're still on the task page. I can turn the task page on and off, but having selected the start waypoint, when I turn the task page off, so we go back to the normal display, then start is showing here as the current waypoint. If I turn the task back on and go down to TP1 and I turn the task off, you'll see it's now showing TP1. Okay, so that's the combination of the task page and the waypoint selector knob, which says waypoint, selecting a waypoint. Okay, and the last knob I haven't shown you is the nav data knob, and that is not changing the waypoint. It's you telling the flight computer how much real estate space would you like to take up on this page with waypoint nav information. And if I scroll down, that's saying I would like 0 space on the map taken up with this nav information. Scroll up once, you say I'll just have the direction arrows, thank you very much. Scroll up again, you say I'll have the direction arrows plus 1 waypoint. Or you can say I'll have the direction arrows plus 2 waypoints, and you can kind of keep going. You can have as many as you like. There's a trade-off about how much map space you have left. And from multiple flights with the plane, once you've set how much data you like to see on the page, it will remember that from one flight to the next. But it's pretty easy to change it. So what I showed you when I first introduced this gauge was actually this. It only had one waypoint change showing, and you scrolled through the waypoints, or you clicked to select the next waypoint using this knob. So if I go back, let's say the current waypoint is turn point 1. If I show 2 waypoints, the current waypoint is still turn point 1. It's showing me where to get there, but this is showing me the information of how to get to waypoint 2 and what the distance is, the cumulative distance. And it's saying, well, you've got to go 35 kilometers approximately to get to turn point 1. Then it'll be about another 13 kilometers to get to turn point 2. And it's predicting your arrival height, the first one, will be 1,960 feet MSL, and it'll take you about another 1,000 feet. So you'll be even further underground to get to the next one. Obviously, all these numbers, ultimately, you can have your height added to it. If you're higher up, then your arrival height itself will be higher up. Maybe at the end of all this, I'll just pop up into the air. Now, because we've set our display setting that will have 2 turn points plus the arrows, I can still change the waypoint from TP1 to TP2, and you'll see what happens is TP2 is now the current waypoint, and I'm still displaying 2. So I'm displaying TP2 and TP3. And if I'm either turning this or clicking it, if I click it again, TP3 is going to become the current waypoint, and finish will be the final waypoint. Okay, and this kind of illustrates a point, which is having 2 waypoints up is most common when you have a suspicion that you might be getting onto final glide, even though you haven't finished this particular leg. So if I show you this particular course on the map, you might suspect that on the way to this turn point, you will already achieve final glide all the way around it to the finish. And if that's the case, you definitely want to have these 2 waypoints up, because it will say, oh, you're going to arrive here at plus something or other height, and it shows you arriving, if this is Mifflin, which it is, arriving at 813 feet, maybe it'll say here, well, you're going to arrive at 1,000 feet there. So you think, okay, that's 180 feet off the ground. That's great. And you can start your final glide early, go around the turn point and finish it. And you can see this is taking into account that the wind speed on these different legs is changing, and it's using that, altering the calculation. It's taking other things into calculation, like how fast will you be flying. This is what I told you before. We're kind of showing on this gauge whether you're carrying ballast or not is taken into account. Okay, so this is kind of a key number, and just with this screen up, let's say I'll keep it simple, we're only displaying 1, and let's change it so that it is the finish. And here we're saying our current waypoint is the finish. The finish is only 0.2 of a kilometre away, and we're currently at 800 feet. It's saying you're going to get there at approximately 800 feet, which makes sense. It's only 0.2 of a kilometre. It's only 200 meters away. In the flight plan, we have the opportunity of recording the elevation of each of the waypoints, particularly if you use user waypoints in Little Nav Map. When you use airfields, it gets a bit more complicated. They get jammed in, but you can always edit the flight plan and put whatever you feel is the correct altitude in there. It is worth doing that for a gliding flight. Power flights, they have waypoints with these odd heights because if it's an intermediate during the flight, then there's all sorts of things. Well, maybe we want to be 8,000 feet as we go around that waypoint or something. And the flight plan is designed to help the autopilot. But that's not massively useful when you're doing gliding tasks in it. It's better if you try and make it so that the altitude of each of your waypoints is the elevation of the ground at that waypoint. And you'll see why this kind of makes sense. So this is all very well. You say, well, I'm going to arrive at 800 feet MSL, and the finish height is 813. You can choose a setting. I'm going to bring the last button up here, settings. And now with this the hints are here. You can scroll down through the settings. This is where you choose your units. At the bottom here is, would you like the arrival height to be MSL, i.e. mean sea level heights, or do you want it to be above ground level? Then you can see why I click select. Now I've set it to above ground level. Go back in here. And now, instead of saying it's going to be 800 feet, it's saying you're going to be at minus 11 feet. Okay. And when you look at the example flight, the demo flight using this panel, you see we're totally taking advantage of this, which is where when you think you're planning the final glide, you definitely want it AGL, above ground level, because you're looking at this number, and if it's negative, that's bad. If it's positive, it's good. And you learn to look at this number carefully, and you're thinking, well, before I start, depending on the length of the final glide, depending on whether you're going into a headwind or not, you're kind of, how much risk is there is what you're looking at. This still will calculate it accurately, but it has no way of knowing what you're going to fly through. And you'll see that in the example of my demonstration. I knew in the demo flight, which is also on YouTube, that I had a reasonable guess at some ridge lift on the way, so I was prepared to be a little bit optimistic of what was my arrival height going to be when I set off, because I was hoping to pick up a little bit of height on the way. And you're watching this number, but it's a lot easier to watch it relative to the height of your destination, because it goes either positive or negative. You know how to look at it, and once it's gone like plus 500 positive, you're feeling pretty confident at that point, depending on how far away you are. I mean, you can be 70 kilometers away on a final glide, but these things do fly extremely flat. Okay, so we've covered all the buttons here. North, up, there's the horizons, all the scroll buttons. Center the plane, do that again, zooming, and then here is the nav stuff. Clicking this button takes you to next waypoint. Start, TP1, TP2, TP3. Task shows you the whole task, and nav data is for display purposes. It's how much nav do you want to display, up to and including nothing, and it will always be from your current waypoint to whatever's left on the task. Okay, so this can't show me. You can't show more than 3 if your current waypoint is TP3. It hasn't got anything to show you above that. So don't confuse that. We're showing the whole task.